Now let's take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. First off, following the escalating war between the United States, Israel and Iran, security forces have mounted a heavy presence across strategic locations in Abuja, triggering heightened vigilance in the Federal Capital Territory amid fears of possible spillover risks. Armed personnel were deployed around key government institutions, diplomatic zones and major transit corridors as authorities moved to preempt any security breach linked to the intensifying Middle East conflict. While officials did not announce a specific threat, the precautionary lockdown indicated growing global anxiety over the widening confrontation. In the same vein, the United States Embassy in Abuja cancelled all visa appointments scheduled for Wednesday following heightened security concerns linked to escalating tensions involving the United States and Iran. The development came as hostilities between Washington, Tel Aviv and Tehran deepened, raising concerns about geopolitical instability, energy supply shocks and the potential for retaliatory actions far beyond the immediate theatre of war. Besides, Iran has deferred a planned farewell to its murdered supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, fueling speculation about internal security calculations as Israeli officials publicly threatened to eliminate any designated successor. As the war continues to rage, the League of Imams in Lagos State has warned Nigerians against taking sides or getting involved in any acts that can jeopardize the security of the nation and the peaceful coexistence of people in the country. Also, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced yesterday that an alleged mastermind of an Iranian covert unit accused of plotting to assassinate President Donald Trump in 2024 has been hunted down and killed amid Operation Epic Fury. In other news, President Bola Tinubu has sworn in Olatunji Disu as Nigeria's 23rd Inspector General of Police. The brief ceremony preceded the first Federal Executive Council meeting for the year at the Presidential Villa in Abuja. In a chat with journalists, the new IGP revealed that the police is monitoring potential security implications arising from the escalating crisis in the Middle East, warning groups in Nigeria who pay allegiance to actors in the Middle East to avoid acts capable of causing insecurity in the country. On state policing, Disu announced that state police has come to stay and should not be seen as a threat to the current federal policing system.
We know we have groups of people, different kinds of Islamic sects in Nigeria. We have those who pay allegiance to this eastern part of the world as well. So we know if anything happens in the eastern part of the world, the repercussion will come to us. So we are putting all necessary actions. You can see policemen on patrol. And most importantly, we are talking to them to ensure that they do not take laws and orders into their hands. State police has come to stay, and the police should be able to contribute their own part in making it succeed. The police are not afraid. Our jobs are not being taken. It's just an issue of partnership.
The Federal Executive Council has approved a plan to tackle long-standing power transmission challenges and set up a multi-sector committee to drive its implementation. The Council also announced the immediate suspension of the cashless policy at the nation's airports. These were some of the key outcomes from Wednesday's first meeting of the Council of State, or Council for 2026. State House correspondent Disu Moran reports.
The first federal cabinet meeting for the year. It began with the swearing-in of Olatunji Disu as the 23rd Inspector General of Police and other members of key federal commissions and agencies. After deliberations, the council approved memos from the president, including one to set up a grid asset management company targeting the transmission segment.
The president has said that where the problem is mainly in our quest to solve the power problem is largely in the transmitting section. And therefore, Mr. President came with a bill mulling the idea of setting up what is called the Grid Asset Management Company, GAMCO, Grid asset management company. Of course, this is still work in progress.
A multi-ministerial committee has been set up to drive the company's establishment. It will review existing laws, regulations, and investment in the transmission sector before submitting recommendations to the National Assembly. Since the sector was unbundled into 2013 into generation, transmission and distribution, transmission has remained under government control, with frequent grid failures limiting the amount of electricity that reaches homes and businesses. Public concerns were also addressed. Just 4 days after its rollout, the president suspends the airport cashless system after gridlock in Lagos and Abuja caused hardship for travelers. Authorities would temporarily revert to a hybrid cash and electronic payment model.
Mr. President therefore directed me that we should go back to the drawing board. We should go back to status quo, suspend the present system whereby people will have to pay through the various means we have introduced at the various gates across the country, and then go and perfect the system properly. In fact, the president directed me that this should not take too long.
Council further approved major infrastructure spend in the works sector, including reconstruction of sections of the Abuja-Lokoja Highway and the Ibadan-Ilesha Road. Projects are also set for commissioning across geopolitical zones of the country.
The construction or reconstruction of Ibadan, Ife, Ilesha. And this project is 108 kilometers. It was previously awarded by the previous administration, but nothing tangible was done.
In health, nearly 10 billion naira was approved for antiretroviral drugs, supporting local pharmaceutical production and preventing shortages.
Earlier in the year, there was some anxiety that Nigeria was going to run out of ARV. With this approval, that anxiety is laid to rest.
In education, the Council revived the National Commission for Mass Literacy, imposed a 6-year ban on new private universities, and recognized medical fellowships as PhD equivalents, among others.
While the Council's decisions aim to ease the daily challenges of Nigerians, many will be watching to see how soon these approvals translate to real-life impact, especially on travel and power. From the Presidential Villa, Adesua Omoruan, Arise News.
Thank you, Adesua. The Senate has consolidated proposed legislation aimed at strengthening the regulatory oversight of the Central Bank of Nigeria on financial technology operations in the country. The upper chamber also considered tougher legislative measures to curb Ponzi scheme fraud following recent financial scams, including the reported 1.3 trillion naira allegedly lost by Nigerians to crypto bullion exchange CBEX in April 2025. These moves received broad support from stakeholders during a public hearing on the Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act Amendment Bill of 2026 and a motion on an investigative hearing into the operations of Ponzi schemes in Nigeria. The hearing was organized by the Senate Committees on Banking, ICT and Cybercrime, Capital Market and Anti-Corruption and Financial Crimes. Moving on, deliberate poisoning of fruits and other consumables has become rampant in Nigeria with its attendant health risks and even death. In this special report, Arise correspondent Tolu Ojewumi talks to Abuja residents on their encounter with forcefully ripened fruits and how this can be corrected in both local consumption and export, including the role of the National Plant Protection Organization of Nigeria. Let's take a look.
Fruits are an inevitable part of human diet with vitamins and micronutrients. With different fruits available at different seasons throughout the year, they not only nourish the body but also prevent hidden hunger. But when their state of safety becomes doubtful, at best, consumption is a risk.
They arrive by himself. You know, say na from whom I dey buy am. Na from whom I dey buy am for market. I don't know. You know the food cover it again.
Okay, the one when the food cover. That one if you see a man, you go know just food cover. Because if you touch a man, your hand go too soft. No, me I dey bring am for market like that.
In recent times, several fruits across Nigeria have been reported to contain harmful chemicals injected by either the farmers during planting or the middlemen for ripening or preservation. Whatever the case, deliberate poisoning is a major primary health concern in Nigeria.
Fruits should be allowed to ripe naturally. I mean, that's the way God has made it to be anyway. And we should not do anything that will temper the natural process of ripening, because if we do, it affects the nutritional value of the fruits. It affects shelf life, and the rate of deterioration too can be affected. So generally, we do not encourage people to ripen their fruits forcefully.
What is even more worrisome is that many fruit exporters are also culpable of this menace.
What can be done? These are all food safety issues. I think we can come up with stringent regulations. If all the government agencies that have mandates around SPS and food safety, if we can synergize and work together, we can come up with guidelines that we can even give to fruit sellers.
Again, who's checking to hold fruit farmers and exporters accountable in Nigeria? How efficient is the National Plant Protection Organization of Nigeria in upholding the International Plant Protection Convention?
We have so many government regulatory agencies as quarantine that we work with. We work closely with the customs, we work closely with NEPC, we work closely with farmers associations and farmers groups. We work closely with exporters as well, across board, NAFDAC, Federal Produce Inspectorate Service. We work closely with NDLA too, because we've seen cases where people smuggle drugs inside food produce.
Arise News went to the streets of the nation's capital, Abuja, to get the views of residents on their encounter with forcefully ripened fruits and what they did when faced with such.
I felt, okay, seeing it the way it was, let me just buy. And after buying it, I ate. It was another thing entirely. I couldn't get myself. My stomach and everything was just, I was troubled. Seriously. There was nothing, that night throughout, I couldn't sleep.
With stricter regulations and compliance enforcement of International Plant Protection Convention, hopefully, fruits, which are Nigeria's staples, will be safer for consumption and daily nourishment.
What goes around comes around. Cutting corners eventually comes home to roost. As a fruit trader, we are in the business of saving lives. And your adherence to safety measures is proof that you're committed to the cause. Whatever becomes of our guts after every bite is in your hand. Tolu or Jewumi, Arise News.
I think he quite enjoyed that report a little too much. The way he ate the fruit at the end and was smiling, but very important report at this time, especially as it has to do with what we consume in Nigeria and regulations around to what extent chemicals are used to preserve it. But among, aside from this story, we find Dr. Bati, we have other stories, of course. Day 6 today of the Israeli-Iranian war, and the FEC meeting, FEC meeting, the first of this year, 2026. Yesterday, IGP sworn in Olatunji Disu, speaking as to what his first quick wins will be. Your take on this story.
So a couple of stories making rounds. Number one, good report there by Tolu. And what he's talking about is really very apt, because there's a proliferation of cancer in our society, and these things can be linked to carbide and other chemicals. And apart from that, they have an effect on every part of human body. But the question we should ask is, how do we now ensure that people do not get to consume this fruits grown with carbide? Do we regulate the fruit sellers? It's an open market. That's going to be difficult. It's almost a very informal sector. It's almost impossible. What are the check signs for people when they see these fruits? All right. Is it better for people to buy them in a state that they've not ripened yet and go ripen them themselves? I consume a lot of bananas, for instance. I like to buy my bananas before it ripens and make it ripen under my watch. So there are many methods you'll have to use. Obviously, we know people will have to get fruits in. Another part we should even talk about is fruits that are imported into the country.
Yes, that's a big one.
Apple and the likes and all of that. What is the chemical preservation? What is the grapes? What is the preservation threshold? Who inspects all of these fruits, exotic fruits? As a note of caution, at least I limit the foreign fruits intake I have because you cannot control what is coming out of there. But at least seasonal fruits that we grow within, like your oranges, your pineapples, your mangoes and all of that, you can still limit. So it's a holistic work that we have to do, part-time. As regards to the U.S. war, so there's been an official out of America that says America spends about $1 billion every day shooting tomahawks and the likes. And that shows that definitely they've gone over $6 billion plus the F-15s that came down. That's going to cost them about $315 million to replace. The Senate took a vote yesterday. Yes, a lot of Republicans supported Trump so that he will continue with the action, because if the Senate has taken a vote, he will have rerouted it back. And if the vote had gone against Trump, he will have rerouted it back to the Senate so that they will have oversight over the war. But Trump got his way. Obviously, I wasn't surprised that Senator Fetterman, did vote with the Republicans. I'm not surprised. Sometimes I wonder what makes Fetterman a Democrat anyway. So after that has happened, you've seen more incursions. Hegseth gave a press briefing yesterday. They talk about sinking an Iranian ship in international waters. There's also a report that those Iranian ships were actually coming back from a drill. They were not activated for war, but the Americans are saying this is a war situation. That's another talk, violating international law, sinking an international waters. I think the Sri Lankan Navy said they've been able to recover a couple of bodies as regards that. He also talked about the fact that very soon they will get air dominance over Iran. Iran will not be able to shoot nuclear weapons. But on the contrary, there's been incursions made by Iran also yesterday. Yes, the rate at which they shoot the weapons have decreased, but Iran is still shooting the weapon into, Israel and the likes. Israel committing a lot of, criminal act out of Lebanon because they've extended the frontiers of the war into Lebanon. That's another one going on now. And at the military base at Turkey, out there in Cyprus, the British government has now come out to say that the incursion that came in was not by the Iranians. The drone that came in was not by the Iranians. So the question is, who planted that drone? There's been allegations here and there that the Israeli authorities might be behind this. CNN also broke a story yesterday that America are talking with the Kurds. So what they're trying to do now is to get an incursion into Iran using, opposition groups and arming them. If you go back in history, if you go back to Charlie Wilson, this was the same thing Americans did with Congressman Charlie Wilson during the Cold War. The war was fondly called Charlie Wilson's War, where he armed the Mujahideens. But don't forget, it was this same Mujahideens the Americans armed during the Cold War then to get a one-up over Russia. These are the people that formed together and splintered into your Talibans of this world that came back to hurt them. So if America is arming the Kurds today, because there are different, about 4 or 5 different Kurdish party against Iran, if you arm them today, and Iran has been bombing into the Kurdish areas, if you arm them today, the question is, do you know the after effect in the future? So it's obvious that people do not learn from this. On the international scene, ACLED, that talks about maritime, on the international scene, traffic has dropped, tremendously. I think to about 90%, less than 90%, more than 90% traffic has stopped on that coastline because of the closing of the Strait of Hormuz and all of that. So Trump's assurance that is going to pay for the insurance, is going to give the ship naval backing. It's obviously not working. Prices are ratcheting up. So I think JP Morgan is saying crude oil price could go up to $100 per barrel. You're seeing a lot of dynamics on the international scene. Real quickly, congratulations to the new IGP, yes, state police and all of that. We'll be able to see, he set up the committee, so we'll be able to see how they're going to harmonize this. There are many questions on state police we'll be able to ask. What's going to be the oversight level like? Who is going to ensure accountability? What's the role of the Police Service Commission? Who is going to hold these people accountable? Who would you be able to report to when a police does something overboard? In a situation where you have a governor that wants to use the police, for his own political benefits, how do you stabilize and things like that? So there are many multiple questions that we'll have to ask. As regards the first FEC meeting, yes, they said some appropriations have been made to works and health. The question is, will the money be cash back? We don't want to hear a case. Something happened the other day where some lawmakers were talking about a 1.15 trillion release and they were talking about the fact that it wasn't cash backed. So we want a case where there's going to be cash backing. As regards to CBN, I'm excited that the Senate is saying yes, oversight functions to be able to, regulate fintech and the like. But what they should do is to have a regulatory sandbox where they can actually talk to the fintechs, know the oversight, understand the ecosystem. Because I know that there are a lot more things that the regulation should be able to do. As regards Ponzi scheme, yes, there also needs a level of oversight. SEC needs to be quicker and responsive. I remember reporting a case recently to SEC that even involved me, that my face was being used to manipulate with AI and the likes. And a lot of people got duped that even came to the station here. Yeah. So we need an holistic market for that. But this has just touched on some of the stories. I yield the floor.
Okay, let me talk about, to start with, food safety in Nigeria, because the whole issue about these fruits that are sold by the roadside, and then they've been treated with carbide to ripen them. Yeah, the clear indication is that this poses a threat to public health. And the major issue is consumer protection. We already have a Federal Consumer Protection and Competition Agency, but, it's already overstretched because the FCCPC has to look over almost everything. But what they do in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, if you like, in Britain, is that they have what they call a food safety agency. I think the time has come in the face of this threat for Nigeria to have food law that is enforced by Food Safety Agency. That Food Safety Agency, which is a non-ministerial agency, will have the responsibility to carry out inspections and to maintain standards. Because indeed it is the truth that most of these items sold by the roadside, many Nigerians patronize them at their own risk. And the larger implication has to do with the health. So there are many people who die in this country, not necessarily because of, biological issues, but because of the kind of environment in which they have found themselves and what they eat. As the doctors say, what you eat is what determines your health. So that will be the position in that regard. It's not enough to complain about it. What is more important is to do something about it. Now, Senate, again, having to do with the consumer, or in this instance, the buyer, proposing bigger penalties for people who embrace Ponzi schemes. In Yoruba, they call it kalo-kalo schemes, speculative gambling. In fact, many of the Ponzi schemes, I think at a point, the EFCC identified about 58 illegal Ponzi schemes in Nigeria. In fact, none of them is illegal. Patronizing a Ponzi scheme is it's a crime in Nigeria. But how many persons have been punished for even, getting involved? Because the idea is that if you invest this, a money doubling, kind of a business. They are not registered with the CBN. They are not registered with SEC. They are not registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission. These guys just run business and they swindle people. Now, the penalty in the law at the moment is 10 years imprisonment. Yeah. So I support the idea of the Senate debating the proposal to increase the punishment. In fact, they should make it life imprisonment. But the more important thing, in my view, is that buyers should beware. That's the caveat emptor in this particular case, because the Ponzi schemes that we have had in this country, you look at it, it feeds on the greed of the average Nigerian. If you are greedy, you will fall victim. And then you cry, you expect commentators, either in print or broadcast, to come and defend you and say you have been swindled. So buyers should beware. And it also speaks at a moral level to this get-rich-quick mentality that we have in Nigeria. Everybody wants to ride the Rolls Royce, even when generations in their families never rode a bicycle. So that we have that moral turpitude side of it. Now, state police, congratulations to IGP Tunji Disu, who has not taken the oath of office. He has his job cut out for him, we have been saying. But the lingering issue is state police. He has talked about welfare. He has talked about respect for human rights. He has talked about professionalizing the police. Now he has made state police a priority. I think persons who participated in the 2014 National Political Conference will be glad. Yeah. Persons who have always asked for state police as part of having a proper federalism in Nigeria will also be glad. However, the devil is in the details, and that is why he has set up a committee to begin to work out the details. That committee will be well advised to look at the state police bill. There was once a state police bill proposed by Senator Ike Ekweremadu. Now, they can also study that, as part of, working on memory. But what is beautiful about what Tunji Disu is proposing is that, well, in the past, policemen naturally, both retired and serving, were opposed to the idea of state police because of this territory, protection behavior that is very traditional with Nigerians, whether you are talking of media houses or you are talking of police or you are talking of legal institutions. Nigerians are so desperate to protect territory. But we hope that this is a step forward. Now, very quickly, about these airports, where they now say you have to have a card to be able to pay for tolls. The whole idea in most places where they insist on electronic payment is to check corruption. Because we have also said that many of these toll gates, airport payments, they are collection points for corrupt persons within the system. So in terms of principle, in terms of objective, government is trying to ensure transparency and accountability, which is in order. But the way they have gone about it is the problem. Because Nigerians just woke up March 1 in different airports in the country, and they were told that they will have to use electronic payment. And in fact, another area that should be looked into is that there is a designated bank. If you say you don't have a card, they will tell you, go and buy from this place. There's already a designated bank. How was that bank or agent selected? All of these are questions that people can legitimately raise. And I think that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is in order to tell the Minister of Aviation and his team to go and take another look at it so that, Nigerians can be convinced and enough publicity should be done. So that even if it is the way to go, Nigerians will be prepared, not the kind of ambush. It was an ambush operation that happened on March 1, and many Nigerians missed their flights, including international flights. That's not acceptable. So President Tinubu has acted well by coming to the rescue of Nigerians. Now, as for the situation in Iran, let me just look at aspects of it. It's a long story. It's a developing story. And the crisis continues to intensify. Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary of the U.S., says the person behind the attempted assassination of President Trump in 2024 has now been eliminated. But he did not give operational details. Is that person among the 48, military security leadership of Iran who were eliminated along with the Ayatollah? He has not said so, but he has just given that information. Second thing is that the barrier, the final, obsequies, well, I hope that's what Muslims use, of the Ayatollah was supposed to start yesterday. But because of the intensification of the crisis, they have now suspended it. You have the Guardian Council, the three body of chief, the president, the minister, and the security chief. And then you have the 88 assembly of experts who are the ones who are looking at how to appoint a new person. And Article 111 of the Iranian constitution gives the assembly of experts the powers to appoint a new Ayatollah. Now they've said they are slowing down because Israel and America, they are saying whoever comes there, they will eliminate him. The person that they've been touting is Mujabi or Mujab. The son of the late Ayatollah. But sooner or later, they will need to appoint somebody to lead the country. But now the Guardian Council is in place, and the 88-member Assembly of Experts are saying that they will get around to it. Well, there are other details, the Nigerian embassy, the American embassy in Abuja, the consulate in Abuja, or is it the embassy they have there, has cancelled further visa applications for Nigerians, because your people have been protesting everywhere in Abuja, Lagos, and all of that. Even Abuja has been shut down by security people. But Nigerians protesting about something they know nothing about. The deification of ignorance in this country is one of the sore points about being Nigerian.
All right. I think one of that's hard, Dr. Martin.
Tread softly. You know, there's a religious connotation.
I was going to say that.
So
it's not just about ignorance.
No. The deification of ignorance in Nigeria is one of the sore points about being Nigeria.
Yes, I agree.
That's a general statement.
I know, but
that can be defended.
But in terms of the Ayatollah, the Ayatollah is not just a political leader; he's also a spiritual leader. I'm sure. I mean, we know that he's also a spiritual leader, and he leads the.
Most of the people who are protesting over Israel using American flag as flag, they have no knowledge. They don't understand what the issues are.
It's what they're told.
It's a legitimate editorial point to be made.
It's what they're told. Okay, can I come in?
Please,
Thank you so much.
Please,
all right, can I come in? So, of course, we know that the Ayatollah is not just a political leader. He's also a spiritual leader of the Shia Muslims, of which we have a number of them in Nigeria. They come under the headline of the IMN, and they are the ones who are protesting. Yes, and so it is important to note that when people look at the relationship between Iran and Nigeria, from a religious point of view, we have some people of the sect, of the Shia Muslim sect in Nigeria. We have seen them protest in the past when their leader El Zakzaky was also, held in custody. So it's not the first time they're protesting. However, the way and manner in which this is managed is very critical, and that's why the new IG of police made mention of it. In fact, one of the key things he talked about after his swearing in yesterday on how he would douse tensions. I think it was also important and instrumental that the League of Imams in Nigeria also released a statement as to finding a way to calm tensions and to ensure that people don't go ahead of themselves. We cannot really legislate on what people believe in or what they are, in terms of their ideology and what they choose to protest on. What we do not want to see is the protest turn violent, or it be hijacked, or it become, it escalates. That's what the Nigerian government should be looking at, to see how to manage it in such a way that it doesn't escalate. And I'm glad that they pointed out the recent protests that were hijacked, and that the country is still trying to recover from it in terms of paying and restoring some of the infrastructure that was destroyed at the time. And so it's important that we manage information at this time, especially for people who believe very strongly. We know that one of the most difficult wars to fight is the war of the mind, when it has to do with ideology beyond just a political leaning. And this is what we see, we face here in Nigeria. But moving away from that, it has been said, and we look at what has happened. Today is day 6 of that war. And whilst the Americans must have expected a reprisal attack from Iran, perhaps they might have been taken by surprise to what extent, and their stroke of attacking some of the members of the Gulf states. And so you would see that the members of the Gulf states who were attacked have not retaliated, because at the end of the day, what we're looking at is to see how to de-escalate tensions and not to have more losses than anticipated. You would see that the EU is not united in terms of their stance on this war. Some are for, others are against, and the United States is now threatening sanctions, trade sanctions against some of these EU countries that have refused to support America's incursion. It has been said, I think Rufai Odonu said it earlier this week, around perhaps the president, as President Trump, should count his wins in this war already and find a way to bring it to an end in order to reduce the extent of the casualties of this war. One of the things that has been spoken about, of course, is the fact that some of these countries that depend very highly on tourism have been hit, and so they are working night and day. Qatar, for instance, United Arab Emirates, where for some of them they've had to shut their airports, they've had to restrict visitors. It's affected daily economic activities. The government is having to step in to support some businesses in the tourism sector. And of course, all these will not all go well with these countries and the heads of these countries. And so what we're looking forward to is a quick resolution. However, Iran, despite the reports that, the missiles are reducing by the day in terms of their capacity to sustain the war, are not backing down. And so for the United States, I'm not sure that the president envisaged such response from the Iranians. Yes, he had expected retaliation, escalation, but not to this extent, including drawing some of the Gulf states in. So the conversation would be, how will this war end? In fact, Pete Hegseth, in that communication yesterday, had increased the potential length of time for the war to 8 weeks from President Trump's initial 4 to 5 weeks of this war coming to an end. Are we going to see a war in perpetuity, it longer, or are we going to see it come to an end? And what would be the impact? Now, for Nigeria, America issued a travel advisory for its citizens here in Nigeria and talked about even the potential of some of them being attacked because of, the fact that they're from America and protests going on. And then we saw heavy presence in the capital of Abuja, FCT. We saw police presence there. And so we can see how on the international scene, even back home in Nigeria, we'll begin to see the impact of that. Yesterday, we talked extensively about the economic impact of the war continued, the rise in oil prices, the effect on the price of goods and services here in Nigeria based on PMS going higher as well. We've begun to see that. So these are some of the things that touch us back home here in Nigeria. Now, moving on to Mr. Olatunji Disu, who's come on board at a very fragile time in the history of our security in Nigeria. We've talked about and almost set up some of his quick wins. I'm glad that he doubled down on his willingness to improve the welfare of the police officers. And he's talked about the willingness of the president to collaborate with him on this. Because it's often said that when new IGs come into power, they often ring that rhetoric of improve welfare of police officers, we must do better than build their barracks, pay their allowances and the likes. But usually, at the end of the tenure, there's no money, it's not cash backed. And at the end of it, we just hear rhetoric, to just hear talks, and nothing happens in that regard. I hope that as part of his legacy as IG would be to actually improve the conditions of service of our police officers. We must speak up for them. It's easy to criticize how professional or unprofessional they are, but they work under some of the harshest conditions, and so hopeful that this IG might change the story. Now, I'd mentioned earlier last week that the Tinubu administration would potentially leave the legacy of state police. And you can see that one of the key things the IG of police has done is to set up a committee to begin that process, or to build up on the processes that have already begun by previous administrations, and to see state police come to light. More than ever before, we see an agreement in the states, state government subnationals in support of state police. But one thing that we keep on talking about is that to what extent would this play out for the elections 2027, imposing that much power in the hands of subnationals? So what we're looking forward to seeing that committee come up as safeguards to ensure that it's not abused to a very large extent through accountability, checks and balances in the operation and in the design of the law. But we'll definitely keep our eyes on this one. It's a developing story with the new IG of police.